Hello, I am Zach Whalen. I'm an associate professor at the University of Mary Washington, and I teach in the Department of Communication and Digital Studies. I am recording this video as part of the ReFocus Online initiative, sponsored and organized and hosted by the Center for Teaching and Digital Learning Support at UMW. In this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the strategies that I used in the spring semester when we all had to pivot to remote, and that I've continued to find helpful as I've been teaching fully online this summer. I'm mainly going to be talking about video content and how I record that and how I balance video content with other kinds of things and negotiate between synchronous and asynchronous content for my students. I've developed a workflow that I find pretty useful for me and also for my students, and so I'm going to be talking about that. The first part of the video, the next part, I will be talking about the technical side of how I set that up and some of the software I use. And then I'll talk about the pedagogical strategies and how I organize things in a workflow sense for my students. So I'll talk about technical things first and then pedagogical things in the second part of the video. So I hope it's helpful. Thank you for watching, and here we go. For my classes, I do a lot of streaming video and recorded video, and I'd like to take you on a quick tour of the setup I have for doing that. It's over here in the corner, so let's go check it out. As you can see, a major feature of this space is the green screen, and if I get a little closer, you can kind of see how I've done this. These are poster boards, just regular neon green poster boards that I got from Walmart. They cost less than $1 each, and they work great. This is a brick wall, and I glued these to the wall. I use this as a green screen when I'm broadcasting, and I'll show you how that looks in software in a moment, but I need a little bit more light in here. This room, we call it the sunroom, and if it is sunny outside, the lighting is pretty good, but I usually need to boost it a little bit with some lamps. So I found it useful to put these, come on, there it goes. These 3 lamps here to kind of light different parts of me where I'm sitting, and that helps the chroma key look better too. So over here, this is where I sit, and as you can see on my monitor here, the chroma key is substituting the background. The software is substituting the green for transparent, and so I'll show you that in the software in a moment. When I'm streaming, I usually have 2 screens set up. I have my laptop here with the stream manager where I can monitor how it's looking to whoever's watching, and I can see the chat window there whenever anyone leaves a comment there. I forgot to mention one important part of my whole setup, which is my webcam, and you can see it right here on the monitor. This is a basic Logitech webcam that I borrowed from the HCC several months ago at this point, and it works fine. It's not too fancy, but it doesn't have to be. It does record in HD, and that's good enough, certainly, for what I need. It just records my face, and then my face is relatively small in the final video that I'm recording or broadcasting, so the resolution doesn't really matter. It's good enough for what I need, and it should be good enough. If you have one that's similar to this, then it should be fine. I also should mention, as you can probably see, I've got a microphone here. This is a Rode Smart Lav, a lavalier microphone. I actually just got it like a few hours ago. It just showed up, it just arrived in the mail. So I haven't used it very much yet, but it seems to be working pretty well. Until now, I mean, up the last couple months, I've just been using this Logitech's, the webcam's microphone, and it's been working fine. I haven't actually had time to do a side-by-side comparison between the two. I assume this will be better, but the webcam has been okay as far as I can tell. That was a look at some of the hardware and the physical setup that I use. Now I'm going to talk about the software. First, I'll give you an overview of the things that I find useful, and then I'll take a look at each of them in some more detail. First and most importantly, I use OBS, or Open Broadcasting Software. I think that's what the S stands for. That's what I'm using to record this right now, and that's really the heart of what I do, and so I'll spend a little bit more time with that. I also use Twitch to broadcast my videos live, and then that also creates an archive, and it does allow interaction. I'll talk a little bit about Twitch. I use YouTube to archive videos after the fact, and I organize things in channels there and playlists there. And finally, I use Slack during a live stream as a live discussion space, and it also serves as an asynchronous discussion space later on. Here I am using OBS, and I'm actually using a different screen recorder to capture myself using OBS. OBS is a screen recorder, but if you use OBS to capture itself, you get an infinite tunnel, and it's pretty distracting. But this seems to work okay. This area that I'm in right now is the preview of what I will see if I hit record or stream over here. If I hit stream, then this will show up on Twitch. If I hit record, this will save to a file on my computer. And what you're seeing is black behind me right now because it's transparent. The software OBS uses something called chroma key to substitute the green color with a transparent layer that I can put anything behind. For example, if I go to a different scene here on the left, I can put myself in ball circle, or I could put myself in a different part of ball circle. This is usually what I like to do when I introduce a class. If I start off with a scene like this, then this shows up as the thumbnail on the video. It makes it easier for me to tell which is which when I'm looking at them later. And what I've done here is I just took a picture I found of HCC 327, added some writing on the board, and it works. I also have one set up for HCC 328. So to add myself, let me back up a little bit and show you how I got myself here in transparent. I'm going to go down to way down here to the left and add a new scene and show you how I start adding things to it. So now this is a new scene, but there's nothing in it. The sources area is where I can start adding things. So I hit the plus sign. I'm going to add a video capture device, which is my webcam. I already have this in here, so I'll click Add Existing and choose Video Capture Device. I've already added it once. And here I am. Now I'm already transparent in the background because I've already set up this particular capture device profile. But let me show you where the chroma key part is. You right click on it and go to Filters. I've already added this effect filter called chroma key, but I can turn it off just to show you what it looked like originally and what I physically actually really look like right now. The wall behind me is green, but I can turn it back on and everything goes away. So I've got different settings I can apply to it. You can actually change the color of the substitution if you have a different color of screen, and you can adjust different settings on it to make it more or less accurate. It took me a while to get these right, so I'm not going to play with them right now live, but that's the idea. So I have a bunch of scenes set up for different scenarios and different parts or different segments of my classes. I'll talk about those a little bit later. But way back on the left, I wanted to show you what I do to actually stream. Again, I just hit start streaming, but that's going to work because I've already set it up. Since I've already set it up, it really is just that one button. But what I had to do first was go to twitch.tv. I had to make an account there, and then I hit this button, Get Stream Key, and it takes me to a web page on Twitch that shows my stream key. It's basically a long password that I paste here, hit OK, and that was it. Now that I've done that, one step, all I have to do is hit the Start Streaming button, and it goes live on twitch.tv/ZachWhalen. So that was OBS. Now I'm going to show you how working with Twitch actually works. So this is Twitch, and I'm using OBS now to record a screencast of me working with Twitch. I'll talk a little bit more about this setup in a little while, but I wanted to show you Twitch. Twitch is free, like everything I'm using, and you create an account, and when you create an account, you set up a channel. My channel is just my name, /ZachWhalen, so whenever you want to watch my stream, you go to twitch.tv/ZachWhalen, and you can check it out there. You can customize the background of your theme if you'd like, but I guess that's all optional. Twitch is mainly used, if you're not familiar with it, it's mainly used for people who play video games and broadcast themselves playing video games, and then people who watch other people play video games. Not my preferred form of activity, but people like to do that, and that's fine. So on your channel, this is my channel view here. You also have a couple other tools that are pretty useful in here. This is what it calls the creator dashboard, and you can, a lot of this is really built around the assumption that you're trying to be a streamer, and so you've got a lot of tools for that. But here, this is what I look at whenever I'm broadcasting. So you see a preview of your broadcast here. You see how many viewers you currently have, and then you see the chat room down here on the bottom left. I like to edit the stream info so that whenever I go live, people will see Zach Whalen is streaming live, week 5, whatever. So, and that way it also gets, when it saves this stream, it will be named that, and it's easy for me to tell which is which. So I'm not going to stream right now, but that's what I would do to make that look that way. You can also, within this tool, keep an eye on the bit rate to make sure that it's going well. I have found that using my wired Ethernet at home works better than my Wi-Fi. Twitch also has setup guides for how to work with it, and including a guide for using open broadcasting software. And of course, for this to work with OBS, you have to get the key. There's a link within OBS that takes you straight to this page in your settings, and it's the main thing you need is your primary stream key. There's a few other settings you can try, but that's the main thing is just copying that. Now I could stream to YouTube or some other service, I assume, but I like Twitch because it's pretty easy for students to get access to me through Twitch. They just go to twitch.tv/ZachWhalen and they start watching. I like to send a notice in Canvas when I'm getting ready to go live, and also it's a schedule so they know when to expect me, and I also send a notice in Slack. So they have various reminders to know that I'm going live, and then they just tune in. They can watch in the web browser, they can actually watch on their TV too if they have a smart TV or a Fire Stick. And it's pretty low entry as far as getting them to the point where they can watch me on this. They don't have to download anything. Also, they're just watching me, so there's no Zoom. There's no unlike in Zoom where they would be on camera as well. They just have to watch me and then engage in the chat if they choose to, but they don't, and some of them choose not to, and that's fine as well. It's I think a lower pressure kind of environment for them. Students tell me they prefer that. Some students I think probably would prefer to be on camera in a Zoom conversation, but we all know how exhausting Zoom meetings can be, and it's sometimes a little bit easier just cognitively to be there just as a viewer as opposed to attempting to also be an active participant in a Zoom conversation. So I like Twitch. That was a quick overview of how I set it up and how I work with it. Now I'm going to be talking a bit about YouTube. YouTube is a website that lets you host and share and discover videos. I'm sure you've heard of it. I find it useful for organizing the videos that I produce for my class because I can put them into channels. Also, Twitch does archive live streams. You can download those, but they actually don't stay on Twitch's servers for, I think it's about 2 weeks. They disappear after 2 weeks. So I like to put them on YouTube as a more permanent place to store them. Also, Twitch doesn't do anything with closed captioning. YouTube does, and so after I've uploaded them to YouTube, YouTube does the automatic closed captions, and I can go in later and edit those to make them as accurate as possible. Let me show you the workflow for this. Very simple actually. So on my Twitch account, all my streams are here, and you can see actually these are giving me a warning now that they're about to disappear. But I simply download it. I'm not going to go through this process right now, but I download this and download it to my computer. These are, for an hour-long video, they're about 1 gigabyte, so they're pretty big files, but after they're uploaded to YouTube, I can delete them off my computer. I don't need to keep them anymore. That's the whole point. So back in YouTube then, I just go to, well, let me go to my channel here. I hit the create a video button. I'm not actually going to upload a real video, and I like to give it a title that's long and descriptive. Stream GGST 101, week 3, day 4, whatever it happens to be, and then in the notes summarize what I'm doing. I do this because this is going to be fed into the announcements on Canvas, and so students will see this title, and so I want to make sure that when they get that notice on their phone or whatever they use to access Canvas, they'll see archive live stream for week 3 for day 4 is ready. And so that's what I want them to see first. And so I'll put the description there. I have playlists for each of my classes, so I add it to the appropriate playlist. YouTube asks that they insist that you tell them whether it's for kids or not, and that's about it. And then, yeah, the final step is to choose the visibility. I choose to make mine public. I could also make these unlisted and it would still be accessible to my students, but I don't mind making these public. I don't have any reason to keep them private that I know of, so I just make them public. Well, I guess I should say one thing that is a consideration is students. If I'm interacting with students directly in a live stream, then in that case I probably wouldn't put it to public just because they would be, at least not without their permission, because then they would be part of that public video. So I used to have the Slack window visible on my stream as well, but I decided not to because students have been using their real names in there, and so their real names would appear on screen with me as I'm talking. That could be a FERPA issue, so I've decided not to do that, and so in that case I feel okay making it public because it's just me and then the content that I'm trying to show. So that's the basics there. I don't have to, I'm not going to go ahead and complete this. It usually takes about 30 minutes for it to complete processing and uploading, and then it's automatically published on my channel, and then the announcement is sent to Canvas eventually. I've noticed that sometimes it takes a while to actually get to Canvas. I'm not sure why. So that was a closer look at some of the software that I use when I'm recording or broadcasting videos. I didn't go over Slack, and I'm not going to be able to show that because I can't show that to you without showing my students, but suffice it to say, I find Slack very useful for conversations. Now I'm going to talk about the pedagogical decisions and some of the workflow that I've developed as far as when to do what. So pedagogically speaking, these are the steps that I think through as far as content for this class. These are the ways that students will access it, and also how I think of them structuring their access to these things. You notice that some of these are asynchronous, most of them are, but the second step there is synchronous. So I'm going to talk about each of these steps and show you what kinds of things I do for each of them. First of all, ahead of time, I like to have notes and outlines and links available as much as possible. So I find that useful for students to be prepared, and also for them to come back later and see what was that particular topic for that day. This is a summer class, so I did find it easy to organize it in a series of steps. So it's 4 days per week, 4 days worth of content. Even if they're doing it all in one day, I think just thinking of the day as a unit is pretty useful. And so this one is Tuesday, June 2nd. And I found that I can actually, in Canvas, I didn't realize this until recently, but in Canvas you can set it up so that a page has a due date. There's nothing actually to turn in, but it still shows up on the to-do list for students in Canvas, so it helps them keep track of it. Even if they're looking at it later or ahead of time, it puts them in order, which I find kind of useful. They know ahead of time that I'm going to be streaming at 2. That was the time that this class agreed. Many of them would be available and interested in watching it live, so 2 o'clock is what I plan to do. I sent an announcement when I was about ready to stream. I also posted a notice in Slack. I can't show you Slack because doing that would show student names on this, but I would put an announcement in there so everyone would see that, and then they'd tune in live. But they'd already have this ahead of time, and so they will have either read this already or listened to it already, or they'll have easy access to it while I'm talking about it. So that's all there ahead of time. I don't have to send them things in real time. Now, during the live stream, of course, I'll be streaming on Twitch, and they can watch me here. There's a chat room on Twitch. A few students use that, but most of them found it more useful to use the Slack discussion for real-time things, and that's what I encourage them to do, because there's a record of that, and they can look at it later if there's a particular link or an idea that they wanted to come back to. And then during that day, this is a pretty interesting day of class actually. There's an idea, some content we're trying to understand. There's a story about Mike Daisy, who goes to China and investigates he visits some factories there. He comes back and tells a story about it, and that story became an episode of This American Life. It turns out he exaggerated a lot of what he saw and manipulated some of the facts to make a better story. So This American Life had to issue a retraction, and so we listened to the retraction episode, and so there's kind of two layers to this content. We're interested in what's actually going on at these factories, and we talk about that, and how do we know. But then we also talk about the format of audio and the media aspect of that. Like, how does audio communicate this ideas? How do the editors of this piece lead us to feel a certain way about Mike Daisy through the way they've edited the piece? And one key moment is a very long moment of silence. When Ira Glass challenges Mike Daisy to explain himself, there's a very, very long pause, and it's extremely uncomfortable. That's a pause that you can't experience if you're just reading the transcript. So we talk about the importance of the affordances of audio, and silence is one of those affordances. So we talk about I ask students about other moments of silence. We talk about how that moment makes us feel. We listen to it live when I'm streaming, and then respond to it in real time. And then come up with other ideas. And there's a series of questions that kind of follow from that. So I'll show you those in a moment. But afterwards, students can watch the video on YouTube, and this is the playlist that I have for this class, and you can work your way through it. And as you can see, they're kind of long. I don't take for granted that students are going to sit and watch an hour of content from me every day. I don't think they will. So I try to keep these short, or at least I try to put the key things in the notes and in the discussion. So they can start with that, and then if they have questions, then they go to the video and find the part that they're trying to understand. And hopefully they can do that pretty well. But I don't assume that they're watching it all. And in fact, analytics on YouTube are pretty detailed, and they can report to me that, in fact, most people aren't. They're watching the first half or so, if they watch any at all. So it's not something that I count on as a replacement for class by any means. So, but that is what they do. Now, after the fact, as I said, it's useful to, losing my windows here. After the fact, I still want them to work with the ideas. Sometimes there's a discussion, sometimes there's an activity, sometimes it's following up. But this is an example of what that conversation looks like in an asynchronous form. So I've embedded the moment of silence from that episode here in Canvas, And then I have this kind of a series of questions that proceed from that. So think about that. How does that make you feel? Can you think of other moments of silence in media? What was the point in those cases? And then we go into the content here. And this is a discussion board in Canvas, so students can respond on that discussion board and then work through those ideas. Now this is from my spring class, where it was a very large class, 2 sections, and so I had organized them in small groups, and so this is a small groups discussion board for that. In the summer class, it's a much smaller class, so we just use Slack in that case, but I still used Slack to organize asynchronous conversations. I can't show you Slack, but in Slack, it lets you create channels, and I created a channel for each conversation that I wanted them to have, and so they can come, if they're coming later, they can find that specific conversation. And that's basically my setup. This is how I think of a piece of content or a segment of content for a particular day. Again, working through those steps. First, sharing the notes ahead of time, doing a live stream where I work through things, demonstrate things, answer questions, and then the video is archived later for them to access, and then there's some kind of follow-up discussion that's in an organized place, either in Canvas or in Slack. And that's my basic workflow. So that was an overview of how I've adapted a teaching workflow to first teaching remote in the spring and now online over the summer. I'll probably be doing some combination of these things in the fall and maybe spring coming up as well. So I continue to think about the best ways to do this and refine my processes. If you have any questions about how I'm doing this, then my contact info is on my website, it's over that way, on my website, zachwhalen.net/contact. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions about how I'm doing things or any ideas for how I might improve things. This is on YouTube, so if you have a question, you can also comment below or like, and you could even subscribe to my channel if you want to see my content that I put out for my class. So thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful, and have a great day.